Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Future Television. I'm Lina Tamim and these are today's top stories. A Lebanese soldier is killed as assailants open fire on a bus transporting troops on Bir Road in Akkad. Progressive Socialist Party leader Walid Jumblat meets with Lebanese Forces Chief Samir Jaja as part of his efforts to end the 5-month-old deadlock over the presidential election. And United Nations Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura continues his tour on Lebanese officials and reiterates the international community's staunch support for Lebanon's stability. A Lebanese soldier has been killed at dawn when assailants opened fire on a bus transporting troops on the Bir Road in the northern Akkad district. The national news agency says the military deployed heavily in Akkad and erected checkpoints along the road of Halba and Kobayat following the attack, and troops carried out raids in the area in search for the suspects. The shooting angered the residents of Kobayat, who closed schools and announced a general mourning in the town. They also blocked several roads. Separately, armed men opened fire on 2 military patrols in the area of Al-Bisad in the northern city of Tripoli. The attacks did not cause any casualties, but the army responded to the sources of fire. Progressive Socialist Party leader Walid Jumblat has met Lebanese Forces Chief Samir Jaja as part of his efforts to end the 5-month-old deadlock over the presidential election. No comments were made by either leader at the end of the meeting at the Lebanese Forces headquarters in Ma'arab, north of Beirut. Jumblat was accompanied by the PSP's presidential candidate MP Henri Hello, as well as party MP Naameh Taameh and former PSP Minister Ghazi Aridi. Jaja's wife MP Strida Jaja also attended. An LF statement said both sides exchanged books as gifts with dedication phrases written on them. PSP MP Alaaddin Tero earlier said the meeting was part of Jumblat's shuttle between Lebanese leaders in a bid to speed up the presidential election in light of the difficult circumstances the country is passing through. Tero stressed that Jumblat's Democratic Gathering parliamentary bloc remained committed to supporting Hello's candidacy. He also emphasized that Jumblat was not going to Ma'arab to deliver any specific names for the presidency. United Nations Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura has continued his tour on Lebanese officials on his second day of visit to Lebanon, stressing the international community's determination to maintain stability in the country. The UN official and head of the Future Bloc, Fouad Sanyura, have discussed the general situation in Lebanon and the region. The UN official, accompanied by UN Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Mr. Derek Plummy, reiterated the international community's staunch support for Lebanon's stability.
And today is the second day of my official visit here to Lebanon, and it started with an important and useful meeting that I had before with the Iranian ambassador, and now at my own request with His Excellency Signora. Fouad Signora, who I've known for a long time, and I respect his judgment, his analysis, and his experience. I've been therefore taking advantage of this to ask his own point of view regarding both the situation in Lebanon as far as it is influenced from the conflict and events in Syria, and also what are the implications in the region, of which Lebanon is an important part. I think that I was able also to elaborate with him what is our concern about the stability, of course, which is a priority for the UN, for the international community of Lebanon, and also the implications of what is the urgency of finding a political process in Syria to its conflict in order to make sure that the consequences, which have been very heavy, and we all recognize it, to Lebanon of that conflict can be attenuated. And I think I got some very good advice, which I will treasure and use, like many good advices I'm getting from Lebanon. Thank you.
Sustained gunfire echoed across the Turkish border from the Syrian town of Kobani, where fighting steadily intensified between Islamic State militants and Kurdish rebels. 2 days of heavy airstrikes by U.S. warplanes have slowed an advance by the ISIS against Kurdish forces defending the Syrian border town of Kobani. Turkish and U.S. officials said the Islamic State was on the verge of taking Kobani from its heavily outgunned Kurdish defenders after seizing strategic points deep inside the town last week. U.S. officials say the tempo of coalition airstrikes has increased dramatically, with U.S. fighter and bomber planes carrying out 14 raids against Islamic State targets near Kobani on Wednesday and Thursday. More than 170,000 people have fled from the town of Kobani to escape a fierce offensive by ISIL militants. Faisal managed to escape to Turkey before the fighting in the cauldron of conflict intensified, but he still has some family left in the besieged town on the border.
Early morning at the Syrian-Turkish border, and the trail of flight has already begun. According to Turkish officials, more than 170,000 people have crossed this border in the last 2 weeks. This is the highest influx of refugees into Turkey since the conflict in Syria began. Faisal crossed here just days ago with his wife and children, but today he has come back to get the rest of his family. His mother and brother are stuck on the other side of the border. Faisal is from Kobani, just across this border, a town now under siege. Until 6 months ago, it had managed to escape much of the violence in Syria. Then, the Islamic group ISIS entered the area. Faisal had no choice. He fled with his family. This tent is now their home.
شفنا بعيوننا كيف عم يذبح الأولاد والنسوان عم يمسكون عم يروحوا يبيعون بالسوق بالأسواق عم يبيعون يعني بني آدم ينباع وينشرى. قالوا عنا كفار، نحن كفار. الكفر إيش معناته الكفر؟ كافر إيش معناته الكافر؟ بس فهمونا إيش معناته الكافر، إنه نحن مرتدين عن الدين. هن اللي فهمانين الدين الغلط، مو نحن اللي فهمانين الدين الغلط.
Every day in exile is an eternity for Faisal. He yearns to return to Kobani to defend his land. But his responsibilities as a father keep him here. He must also look after his 90-year-old father, whose health is fragile. But nostalgia grips him. He comes here to look at his home village and thinks about his brother, who is still there. He remembers all that was.
كنت تمشي بسوريا ما بتحسي بالفرق إنه هذا كردي أو هذا عربي أو هذا مسيحي أو هذا أرمني. بعد ما بلشت الأحداث صارت طائفية. خلص هذا درزي، هذا كردي، هذا علوي، هذا مسيحي، يعني كل طائفة صارت. وهذول داعش اجوا بدهم يساووا دولة إسلامية، إمارة إسلامية. يعني إمارة إسلامية بسوريا مستحيل تصير لأن سوريا طوائف متعددة. إيش بدك من ديانات موجودة فيها؟
For the thousands of refugees who have crossed into Turkey in the last few weeks, life is now a life in exile. And as the battle rages on for control of the region, the hope of returning is nothing more than that, a hope.
And coming up next, Shiite rebels in Yemen meet deadly resistance from Sunni tribesmen and Al-Qaeda. More after the break. Welcome back. Shiite rebels who have been advancing into mainly Sunni areas of Yemen have met deadly resistance from Sunni tribesmen as well as Al-Qaeda militants. Tribal and security sources said heavily armed tribesmen battled the rebels around the city of Ib, southwest of the capital, which the rebels entered earlier this week. 4 rebels and 2 tribesmen were killed. Explosions were heard across Ib as rebels inside the city came under rocket-propelled grenades fired by tribesmen in the surrounding countryside. The fighting came after hundreds of armed tribesmen demonstrated outside the governor's office in the city on Thursday evening, demanding the withdrawal of the rebels. More than 4,000 people have died from Ebola this year, mostly in Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia. The African Union has made a public plea to leaders across the continent to join the fight against Ebola, saying the deadly virus will hit every country unless the outbreak is curbed.
It looks like something from a sci-fi movie, but this is very much reality. Full body suit, gloves, a mask and boots, essential protection against the Ebola virus, which is killing 7 out of 10 people who catch it. Infection spreads through direct contact with bodily fluids such as blood, vomit or saliva. Covering up is critical.
It's got tape seams, so in terms of the construction of the garment, as that's cut and sewn and stitched together, the seams are taped over to again create a barrier from any liquids ingressing through the material. We have Wellington boots to provide protection for the feet, gloves to provide protection to the hands. We have an additional hood, a respirator for protection against the mouth, and then we have a full face visor as well.
It takes around 5 minutes to get suited up, and the outfit should ideally be changed every 40 minutes. After use, the gear is burnt to prevent possible contamination. But in West Africa, many don't have access to such clothing, and touching the dead is tradition.
In every culture, out of respect for the dead, the body is washed, it's cleaned and so on. But if you do that with someone with Ebola, that's a very, very risky business.
A growing number of health workers are falling victim to the disease, with at least 120 people dying in Guinea, Nigeria and Sierra Leone. A number are calling for danger money, and in Liberia, some doctors and nurses have gone on strike, adding yet more pressure to an epidemic the WHO has called the most severe acute public health emergency in modern times.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. A Lebanese soldier is killed as assailants opened fire on a bus transporting troops on the Beira Road in Akan. Progressive Socialist Party leader Walid Jumblat meets Lebanese Forces Chief Samir Jaja as part of his efforts to end the 5-month-old deadlock over the presidential election. And United Nations Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura continues his tour on Lebanese officials and reiterates the international community's staunch support for Lebanon's stability. That's it from me and the news team here at Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and I'll see you again tomorrow for more updates. Take care.